Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. How many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? Listen once again, boys and girls. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. How many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? Listen to this one. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? A woodchuck would chuck all the wood he could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. Listen to that one more time. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? A woodchuck would chuck all the wood he could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. Boys and girls, what's happening in those poems? Did you hear what was happening, Rodrigo? Yes, sounds were being repeated. And Peter Piper picked a peck. Which sound is being repeated, boys and girls? Yes, the p, p. Peter Piper picked a peck. And the woodchuck, what kind of sounds are being repeated in the woodchuck poem? Yes, Mary? Yes, the ch, ch. Exactly. And what else? There's more in that one. Wood, yes, woodchuck, wood, yeah. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck, yeah. And besides the ch and the wo, what other sound in that one? Yes, the k, k. So we had several different sounds repeating themselves in those poems. Now, there's a certain term that we use called alliteration. Now, that's kind of a big, long word, boys and girls. I want you to see it right up here. Alliteration. I want you to write this word in your notebooks. Where you don't have to necessarily say it, but I want you to at least be familiar with it. Alliteration, and write it in your notebooks, okay? Now, as we said, in those poems that we just talked about, we had the repeat of the letter P. Peter Piper picked. And then we said in the other one, the woodchuck, we had the repeating W, the W. We had the repeating ch. And we had the repeating k, k sound, the K. Okay? Now, I want you to take out, let's see, Fernando, would you pass these out to everyone? I want everyone to take this sheet of paper. It says at the top, alliteration poems. Now, these poems also follow along the same lines as the Peter Piper and the woodchuck poem. These are called tongue twisters. And you'll see that right up here. Tongue twister. Why do you think those poems are called tongue twisters? Anybody have an idea? Yes. Exactly. They kind of trip up your tongue, and as you're saying them and repeating the sounds over and over again, it kind of trips your tongue up. Now, boys and girls, alliteration is that repeated sound in a text, in a poem or a particular reading. All tongue twisters have alliteration, but not all alliteration poems or texts are tongue twisters. Tongue twisters are kind of special. A lot of times they're sort of just silly, nonsensical sorts of things. So I wanted you to take this sheet that you just received, and we're going to read over these tongue twisters together. Okay? Want you follow along as I read it the first time. The first one is the she sells. She sells. Okay, let's listen as I read it. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells on her ship's sail. Okay? Listen to it one more time. And if you feel like reading along with me, try it, okay? She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells on her ship's sail. Okay, let's try it all together. We'll read it slowly the first time. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells on her ship's sail. Okay, let's try it again, maybe a little bit faster. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells on her ship's sail. Now, boys and girls, something to keep in mind, even a native English speaker gets tripped up sometimes on a tongue twister. As we said a minute ago, it twists our tongue all around and we think we're saying something and we say it a little differently than it's meant to be said. So don't worry about if you mess up on a tongue twister. They're kind of meant to be messed up on. Okay, boys and girls, as we read that poem, what were some of the repeating sounds? Who can tell me? Let's write them up here. Alice? Yes. The S sound was a repeating sound. What other sounds were repeating in she sells seashells? Tony? Yes. Shh, shh. Yes, boys and girls, I want you to take a look at the poem She Sells Seashells, and I want you to underline where you see the repeating S and where you see repeating sh, the SH. Go ahead and take a minute and underline where you find those in the poem. Now, boys and girls, I want you to listen to this poem as I read this. Now, this poem is not a tongue twister. This is called Going to St. Ives. As I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Every wife had 7 sacks. Every sack had 7 cats. Every cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, and wives. How many were going to St. Ives? Now, I want you all to take a look at this as well. Fernando, pass one around to everyone, please. As you're getting it, I'm going to read it one more time as it's coming around to you. Once you get yours, follow along. And we'll read it once again as everybody has theirs. Listen carefully as you're looking. As I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Every wife had 7 sacks. Every sack had 7 cats. Every cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, and wives. How many were going to St. Ives? Okay, let's all read it together. If you'd like to try it out loud with me. That would be wonderful. As I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Every wife had 7 sacks. Every sack had 7 cats. Every cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, and wives. How many were going to St. Ives? Now, boys and girls, what kind of sounds were repeated in the poem Going to St. Ives? Okay? Yes, we had the k sound again, and it was represented with a K and a C, as we had cats. What other sounds? Yes, we had the W again with the wives. Yes, we did. Now, what? Yes, we had vowel sounds, the ives, wives. So we'll put in the I, and particularly as it was the IV, I've. What other sound? Yes, the A, the short A, cats, sacks. Exactly. So we had the short A, put a little loop there. Exactly. So we not only have repeating consonant sounds, the ps, was, ks, those, but we also can have repeating vowel sounds in our poems. Let's read this one more time, boys and girls. Going to St. Ives. And I want you to listen carefully for the repeating sounds, the consonants as well as the vowels. Going to St. Ives. As I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Every wife had 7 sacks. Every sack had 7 cats. Every cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, and wives. How many were going to St. Ives? Anybody notice anything or want to add anything to our list up here? You know, as we were reading at that time, I noticed myself, we have the repeating word 7. 7 wives, 7 cats, 7 sacks. So even a repeating word can occur. So we'll write 7 up here on our list. Oops. And I noticed too, as we were reading along, if you'll notice at the second line, notice the number 2, it says, I met a man. That's a little bit of alliteration right there as well. Met a man. So we have a repeating N. It just happens very shortly there, but we could still add it to our collection of repeating sounds. Okay, so now, boys and girls, what we're going to do now is I want you all to group up and you're going to make an alliteration poem of your own. Now you're going to get into a group with a pair. I want you to select at least one letter that you're going to repeat. Maybe you could think of a couple of letters. Then I want you to brainstorm words that you know that begin or have those letters in them. It doesn't always have to begin with that letter, but it could have a lot of that letter in the word. So I want you to group up, brainstorm your letters to use, write a list of words that you know that have that letter, and then I want you to create your poems. And we're going to share our poems together. Now, remember what we've already talked about earlier this week. Many times poems rhyme. They don't have to, but many times they do, and you can incorporate that into your poem if you would like to. Incorporate means put that in there. And also, you might want to, you have your stanzas. They can just be little simple lines, or they can be kind of longer lines, as you've seen in some of the poems we've read earlier this week. So go ahead and group up, and let's get started on writing our own alliteration poems.